I've got a great show for you today. We're going to be going through Joe Biden and how his policies are destroying the country. We're also going to talk about Fani Willis and her situation. To help me do that, I have Horace Cooper with me. Horace, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure. I was really excited about this.
Let me give some background just so that people know who you are. Horace is a senior fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research. He taught constitutional law at George Mason University. He's an author, prolific writer, and a highly sought after guest. And we're going to be going through some interesting things. Yesterday, I was at my doctor. I had a procedure, and during that, we had some time to sit and talk. She admitted to me that she had voted for Joe Biden. She felt like he was a sweet old man who would be kinder to the international community than Trump. And now she says she completely regrets having her vote go towards Joe Biden. She'll never do that again. She said that in her estimation, his policies are destroying America and specifically hurting minority communities. What are your thoughts on his policies? Are they helping? Are they hurting? And your thoughts on how they're being received by minority communities?
Well, let me say big picture, 30,000 feet in the air. Many Americans listened to the 2020 campaign, and they listened from a very significantly positive vantage point. Economic growth was growing at a rate that we hadn't seen in decades. Unemployment had reached levels that we hadn't seen, low levels that we hadn't seen in decades. In fact, Black Americans actually led in economic growth in terms of lower unemployment, in terms of growth in savings, but the country as a whole, we set a record in the number of automobile purchases. I mention that to say that when people are doing well, they believe they have the flexibility to then look at things in a more, maybe, shall we say, generous way. Since things are excellent, we've got this new house. We've set it up. Now what I want to do is put all new furniture in the house, and I want to hire an interior decorator to help me do it. When things are hard and we're having a difficult time trying to afford our mortgage payment, we don't talk about interior decorators. We don't talk about redoing the kitchen. We certainly don't talk about what I might consider the fluff. What 2020 gave us, the American people, was the option to focus on the fluff. And as it happened, our President Biden, our present president, misled the American people and left them with an impression. If you like how things are going now, we're going to keep that. And now you're going to be able to have some of the extras, some of the things that maybe you thought earlier were superfluous. Now, what we see is not only did he not maintain things that were already on a solid track, he turned things around. And many Americans are saying that what they fear is that we are now on a track where we regret tremendously what has happened. And the question is, can we fix it?
Yeah. One thing that people might say to you, Horace, is, but look at the stock market. It's doing so well. And what I'm seeing is two things, and then I want to get your thoughts on it, is the stock market is mostly owned by the top 1%. About 50% of the stock market is owned by the top 1%. The top 10% own over 70% of the market. And so if the market is up, that tells me that all that's happened is the rich have gotten richer, right? And now you have a president that is literally flooding the country with immigrants that don't have the money to sustain themselves. They're immediately going on to welfare, government safety net programs. And so you have this rich getting richer, poor getting poorer. And it's like he's hitting both ends of the spectrum. He's keeping one part of the country extremely happy, and then he's damaging everybody in the middle by flooding it with people that will literally overwhelm these systems that our taxes are supposed to go to as safety net programs. What are your thoughts on that?
We are experiencing what I would call a tale of two cities. On the one hand, elites almost have never had it as well as they do today. The government has bent over backwards to make efforts on the part of the least among us to be able to be self-sustaining. But at the same time, they have made it almost easier than ever for those who are super achievers to continue. Excuse me. During the Trump administration, America saw something that we had not seen in the Biden administration or even the Bush administration before that. Record number of American households went on a summer vacation. You're saying, well, wait, that can't be remarkable. Absolutely it is, because what we had been experiencing prior to setting these records in 17, 18, and 19 was what's called a staycation. I'm broke, I've got the time off, but I can't afford to go anywhere. Similarly, record numbers of Americans went to see grandma for Thanksgiving. It's remarkable when you look up the data, as I do in my first book, what you see is an America that is really realizing the American dream. In every category that you want to look at, new car purchases, new home purchases, kids being able to go to the school of their choice because mom and dad have set aside something that they can afford. In the Trump administration, we saw those numbers skyrocket forward. But during the Biden administration, those numbers have collapsed. The oldest cars on the highway, measured by the Department of Transportation, existed in the year 2023 compared to 1990. You can see how far you have to go back. The age of cars on the road. Every year under the Trump administration, record numbers of Americans bought new cars and the age of cars dropped. What we saw in 2021, 2022, 2023 is record numbers of repossessions, record numbers of Americans saying, oh, wait, I can't afford this. You want to talk about homes? When interest rates made buying a home almost free, record numbers of Americans went out into the marketplace. Now, I'm going to tell you something that has been particularly harmful for Black Americans. A higher percentage of Black Americans used adjustable rate mortgages to buy their homes. Today, that adjustable rate mortgage is higher than we've seen in almost 20 years. And Black Americans are disproportionately finding themselves unable to keep their homes. If you're on the lower end of the income spectrum, today, under Joe Biden's policies, you feel hit harder than you've ever been. Last point, during the Trump years, record numbers of children under the age of 25 and older than 18 moved out of the family home and lived on their own. Over the last 3 years, we've reversed those gains, and we now have one of the highest records ever of kids living in their homes. And by the way, it's not 25-year-olds, it's 28-year-olds, it's 30-year-olds. Americans really can see what I call a tale of two cities.
Yeah, I think they're definitely feeling that. Speaking, just staying in the Black community topic, I'm sure you saw this, but actor Bryan Cranston, famous for Breaking Bad. He did an interview that was on CNN where he said that MAGA, Make America Great Again, is racist. And when did Black people ever have it good? And so he says that nobody should be talking about Trump. Nobody should be talking about MAGA. No one should be talking about making America great again because it alludes to the fact that it might have been good in the past. And then he jumps all the way back to slavery, which is a scar on our nation. It's a horrible time in our nation. But as I did the research, and you would know this maybe better than me, wasn't there a time when most Black families had a really high marriage rate? They had a very low divorce rate. They could live off of one income. Dad would go be a great provider, come home, spend time with his children. And then the government decided we're going to systematically break up the Black family. We're going to jail Black men. We're going to break up homes. We're going to marry the women to the government. What are your thoughts on Bryan Cranston's comments? Is Make America Great Again? Is that a racist comment? Is he up in the night? Help me think through this.
Well, bless his heart, as we would say in Texas. It's great to be an actor because it means that you're not responsible to actually look into the data. I've actually written a book, my first book, which is called How Trump is Making Black America Great Again. And guess what? From the 1900s through the 1920s, it's really about 1880, but from the 1900s to 1930, what we saw as reported by the federal government, anyone can go and look at this data. The characteristic of a person least likely to go to federal prison was that they were a Black man. Let me repeat that. Black men of all Americans from this period were the least likely. Guess what? Children born in stable two-family households, Black families during that period actually had a higher rate than the population at large. Also, employment level, the category or characterization of a type of person most likely to be employed was that they were Black and that they were male. What Bryan Cranston and what many of the mainstream media refuse to explain is how is it during the heart of Jim Crow, when in fact lynchings were setting a record, when in fact there were places in America where it simply wasn't safe to travel. This movie, The Green Book, talked about how you had to be careful about where you were going to go and stay if you wanted to travel from place to place. How is it that during that period, what you saw was a record number of Black Americans attaining a net valuation of $1 million? In fact, the sheer number of Black millionaires that existed in 1927 was higher, that actual overall number, than the number of Black millionaires in 1975. Yet the population had dramatically increased. Bryan Cranston and many other progressives don't understand that when you have a political environment where if you want to work, we will encourage you. If you want to strive, if you want to sacrifice, if you take risks, that the American economy and the American culture will reward that. What has happened since then was first the start of the Great Depression. It crushed all Americans. It hurt many Black Americans for sure. But the Democrats, through FDR and the Great New Deal, pretended that they cared and they loved. Economists now say that the policies of FDR extended and made worse. So it made it longer and made worse the Depression. We had had many, since before the Civil War, boom and bust recessions. They hurt, and then they were over. They were measured in months. The Great Depression was a depression that occurred greater than any we'd ever seen. And the reason was government responded in a way that we had never seen. It has had long-lasting effects today. When you compound what FDR did to crush the economy, crush the American families, many of which, as I point in my book, were disproportionately hurting Black Americans. We then had the Great Society, and the Great Society offered to us all incentives that took people out of the workplace. Now, I call in my book Black Americans the canary in the coal mine. Black Americans suffered disproportionately from policies that rewarded staying out of the workplace, that rewarded people from not staying in committed two-parent households. We know from the data that if you are regularly in the workplace, even with limited and modest skills, you will advance further in your earning and income potential. Even stepping out of the workplace as little as 6 months can give you a major setback in your overall earning potential. And in fact, the more dynamic the economy is, the more significant even a 6 month step away from the economy. And the same is true with two-parent households. You want to talk about crime, you want to talk about educational attainment, you want to talk about the ability of young people to become independent, self-sustaining, and supporting of themselves. The best and most effective way for that to occur is in a two-parent household where the two people are committed and they demonstrate by staying together that they will work through whatever the challenges are. They model the right behavior, children see it, and they succeed. The Great Society dramatically damaged that. Now, I say Blacks are the canary in the coal mine because the policies that have been so devastating for Black Americans aren't merely focused. They certainly aren't specifically focused on Blacks. They're being pursued for all Americans. You may remember that we once had a speaker, Miss Nancy, as I call her, with the ice cream. Miss Pelosi asked that we consider payments to every person so that they could just be free to be whoever they want to be. If you want to be an artist, you shouldn't have to worry about being in the workplace. These very deleterious ideas are still being pursued, they're still being pushed, and all you have to do is look at Black America to see what would happen if they were pursued broadly. Today, instead of what we saw in the 1900s, where Black Americans attained achievements that are records, white America wasn't that far behind. Well, guess what? In the 21st century, where more than 2/3, some estimates are that 3/4 of Black children are born out of wedlock, more than 1/3 of white kids are born out of wedlock, and nearly 1/2 of Hispanic kids are born out of wedlock. The very seductive policies that reward ending the preference, societal and cultural preference for matrimony is affecting all of us. The very policies that give payments, extended unemployment, food stamps, housing assistance, they are harming all of us. If the left is able to get its way, what it's done to Black America will just simply be the example for all of America.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, I knew you would understand that data and topic better than me. Thank you for helping me understand that. Another thing I wanted to talk about, you had mentioned this off air, that Fanny Gate, Fani Willis down in Georgia. the judge, Scott McAfee, and you taught law, so you'll understand this stuff well. He is saying, okay, listen, you can stay on the case, or you can dismiss yourself and allow your lover, Nate Wade, to stay on the case. But I thought that this kind of shocked me. I thought there would be maybe some disqualification because of secret meetings with Vice President Kamala Harris, the J6 committee, paying her boyfriend double everybody else, close to $1 million, cash payments under the table. Nate Wade had 2 secret meetings with the White House. There's just a lot that's been going on, lying about their relationship. And so do you think that Judge Scott McAfee made the right ruling? Hey, you guys both committed a crime and you both lied about it, but we're only going to haul one of you away. What are your thoughts on the Fani Willis situation coming out today?
So I was disappointed in the ruling. I'm on Twitter, I guess it's okay to say, and the reason why, it's called the Horace Cooper. I started a daily post. I called it Fannygate, hashtag Fannygate. And I gave a daily post since Ashley Merchant, Mike Roman's defense attorney, announced this blockbuster filing that there had been some self-dealing occurring among the prosecutors. And I have been following this case in specific detail. It is the case, after reading his judgment, that he believed that there wasn't an actual finding of conflict of interest, but there was an appearance. However, I still disagree that the only person who created that appearance was Nathan Wade. There were statements that have been made in the court hearing to determine qualification that, in my view, merited the district attorney also being sanctioned. Statements that she made about when the start of their relationship occurred simply didn't bear out any credibility. Statements about how she personally kept track of the resources that had been exchanged between the two of them. He received some $700,000 in government payments. However, he paid out nearly $20,000 just in travel expenses. It appears that there may have been another $1,000 or more in meals and local entertainment. There is no evidence that she, Fani Willis, reimbursed him $5,000, $6,000, or $8,000. And since she was under a specific directive under the Fulton County rules that anyone who does business with Fulton County, if that person does business and they give you anything, whether they're barred from doing so or whether they're allowed to do so, you must report the aggregate of $100. There is no way that we're looking at a situation where that wasn't exceeded. She never reported a penny of these. Even if one day on Monday, he paid for dinner, on Wednesday, she paid for dinner, she's still supposed to report the dinner that he paid for. It's not about whether he was allowed to or not. It was about her obligation to make sure that someone who's doing $700,000 worth of business with the county is also engaging in a relationship where gratuities are involved. Now, let me just add this. Then we had cell phone data. We had cell phone data that factually rebutted the claims that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade's relationship didn't start until after she had won the election. I have many good friends. They don't come to my house after midnight. They don't leave my house around 3 or 4 a.m. and then send me a text shortly thereafter. Record that show that these visits occurred. They weren't playing Scrabble at that hour. That's pretty clear. And oh, and by the way, I want to make this point. You don't have to have sex to have a relationship. Now, I watched the hearings. Ms. Willis attempted to suggest that there may have been an erectile dysfunction matter, and that was proof that they couldn't have had a relationship prior to this point. That isn't proof at all, unless, of course, that anytime any couple find themselves where one partner is having erectile dysfunction, we're supposed to assume, well, they're obviously no longer a couple. Secondly, when he was asked to attest, that's to swear in an affidavit before a judge in his own divorce filing that he'd had no outside relationships, and he did this twice, no outside relationships since initiating divorce proceedings, he lied, and he never referenced even after 2021. So now you have a prosecutor having lied in a particular hearing where it was relevant. They asked that question because they need to know. In both of these instances, what we see is clear evidence that there just wasn't truth telling. And even if there wasn't a sufficient, and I think there was, but even if there wasn't a sufficient level of information to say there was an actual conflict of interest, there were a lot of reasonably minded people that thought this created an appearance. And so I felt like splitting the baby the way the judge did let us down. Final point on that. I also commented, I was in these posts, the other areas of jeopardy that are facing Fani Willis. The United States House of Representatives Judiciary Committee is pursuing a subpoena to get documents because whistleblowers have come forward showing that they argue that there were usage of federal tax dollars in a way inconsistent with the grant. The district attorney's office is fighting authority that a judge like Scott McAfee has without being bound by the concerns of whatever any individual arguments might be put forward that something might influence a case or there might be privilege or other issues. They're not bound by that. They are going to get all of the information, and it's pretty obvious that, like me, they sat and watched for hours the testimony, the staff did, and they provided a summary, and they asked the Senate committee to issue subpoenas in the very areas where Judge McAfee refused to allow subpoenas to be issued. They're going to get that information, including her actual banking account statements and any and all records of Nathan Wade, and they're going to be able to lay those side by side. Finally, they also, the state legislature, gave new power to a statewide commission that was created last year that didn't have the authority to punish or discipline prosecutors. That has now passed, has been signed into law by the governor, and all the information collected by this investigative committee will be passed along to them. And it's very, very likely that we're going to still see the very kind of discipline that the judge took a pass at enforcing.
Okay, interesting. So I don't know if he just didn't have the courage to take her out because this is such a nationally publicized, every day in the media story, or just what. But ouch, throwing her lover under the bus about erectile dysfunction, that adds insult to injury. All right, final question, Horace. I appreciate you coming on. Tell us about your new book, Put Y'all Back in Chains: How Joe Biden's Policies Hurt Black Americans. What are we going to read in there? What are we going to learn in your book?
So we've been seeing articles that are increasingly showing how poorly Joe Biden is doing with the so-called Black vote. There has been a generation in which the Black community gives a disproportionate amount of its vote to the left or to Democrats. What hasn't been fully comprehended is that Black America is actually not progressive America. Black America and progressive America disagree on a number of fundamentals. It's been said that Black Americans don't want law enforcement in the community. What you see is about 7 separate surveys when Black Americans were asked during the George Floyd matter. Black Americans reported at a higher rate than the rest of the American population that they wanted more law enforcement, not less. Black Americans want faith in the public square. Black Americans say at a higher rate than any other ethnic group in America that Black Americans pray every day. Black Americans attend religious services at a more frequent rate. Progressives have said, like I just mentioned on law enforcement, that we should defund the police. Progressives also do not wish to see a greater presence and welcoming of people of faith in the public square. Progressives in Black America don't line up on the LGBTQ issue. If you go back and look at the vote in California on gay marriage or same-sex marriage, Black Americans voted at higher rates than the population at large to define marriage as between a man and a woman. Progressives argue at a rate not comparable to any other group that marriage is whatever society defines it. Whether it's hard work and whether hard work should be the better measure of who gets and benefits in society, Black Americans say at a near supermajority that hard work is the best measure of achievement in America. Progressives say exactly the opposite. Progressives say that we need more DEI. We need more programs that put us in racial boxes, not less. Black Americans say at a higher rate than progressives, more than half said we supported the Supreme Court ruling ending affirmative action in college admissions. Put y'all back in chains was a statement that Joe Biden made in which he said that if Romney was elected, Black Americans would be set back. Today, Black Americans are saying we are being set back more than any other group. In fact, Black Americans say that their priorities are being pushed to the back of the political bus by Joe Biden.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds awesome. I'm excited for people to get that book and learn more about it. This has been a great conversation. These are topics that I want out in the public. I want people to hear this stuff. America is really a great place. Yes, it has its flaws and it does have ugly parts of its past. But I think we can move forward supporting each other better than tearing each other down. And I
Yes.
really appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to put a link to your book down below, Horace. But if people want to continue to follow you, learn from you, be updated by you, what's the best place that I can point them towards?
All right, so follow me on Twitter, the Horace Cooper, and also our organization online is Project 21 at nationalcenter.org. And what you'll see is how Americans who happen to be Black have the same ideas, the same hopes, and the same dreams, and that has always been a part of Black America. Our organization, I'm the chairman of it, is just trying to remind people that what people like Al Sharpton and others claim, they're not speaking for Black America, they're speaking for woke America. And our group is wanting to make sure that those strong voices that have existed since the end of slavery continue to be represented in mainstream media. So that's why I was really happy to be able to come on your podcast today.
Yeah, great. Well, folks, if you like this information, you like incredible guests like Horace Cooper, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'm committed to bringing the very best of the best in our country on. Horace, thank you so much for being on today. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.